Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates. And it's been a while since we've done one of the Seattle real estate market news breakdowns, but I wanted to talk about one topic in specific today, and that is this, just the idea of the movement, let's call it that, the movement of people from the city out to the suburbs as a result of COVID-19 and some of the changes maybe in the workplace. Now, before we jump into the article, there have been other news articles recently that might have been worth talking about, like why is the Seattle housing market staying high? Why are home prices remaining high? How are home prices doing in this time? And I talk about these things in my monthly market update. So if you want to see thoughts on that and why the market is continuing to remain strong here in Seattle, please go check out one of those videos on the channel. All right, so this news article was published in the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, Seattle PI. There are a few other news outlets that are also talking about the same thing, but Zillow and Redfin both did independent studies, and they polled people who live in Seattle, work in Seattle, and asked them some questions about where they would prefer to live if they were shifted to a more work from home situation. So the article this month is titled Zillow and Redfin Predict a Suburban Boom in the US Real Estate Market as Remote Work Becomes More Common. So the article starts off here with large tech companies like Amazon and Microsoft extending their work from home policies until fall due to COVID-19 pandemic. Economists are predicting that real estate trends might shift and cause a suburban boom in the housing market. And interesting, I saw Google was actually planning to push their employees, or at least give them the option to work from home until the end of 2020. So we're talking about still quite a bit of time here. A lot of the companies here in Seattle too do have the ability to work from home. And we'll see that more later in the article here, that there are actually a significant amount of jobs that can easily adapt to working from home. And a lot of the tech companies do allow some flexibility, but are giving increasing flexibility right now. And the article continues on. In a newly released survey, the Seattle-based Zillow Group found that 75% of Americans working from home due to COVID-19 would prefer to telecommute at least half of the time once the pandemic subsides, and 66% said that they would consider moving if their job allowed them to telecommute. We'll continue on here before I add a little bit more context. A recent Redfin survey, another Seattle-based real estate tech company, yielded a similar result, with 50% of respondents in cities like New York, Boston, San Francisco, and Seattle, which is where I'm at, saying that they would consider moving out of the city if work from home became permanent. And what's really interesting, this article was published on Thursday, May 21st. And I was thinking about this a few days back before the article was published, just the idea of, for myself and my family, my wife, Christina, and I, we've been talking about why we love living in Seattle. And some of those things include just the people that we're in relationship with. We both grew up here in our locals, so we love the people, and our families live here. So that's part of why we stay. The other part is just the natural beauty, the parks, the beaches, the mountains. And for the last few months, everything's been shut down. So all the things that we really enjoy, all the people that we enjoy seeing, all of the places we enjoy going were closed. And some of them have opened up in limited capacities recently. But what it's caused us to do personally is think about where we would live if this was more permanent. Like what if we weren't allowed to see people? And what if we weren't allowed to go to the parks for longer stretches of time? What if we could work from home more? Now, my job's a little different. As a real estate agent, I'm still out engaging with people, taking certain precautions, but I'm still out doing things. But a lot of jobs have a greater ability to work from home and telecommute than I do. And so as I'm thinking about this, I was only assuming that other people would be thinking this. And it's interesting to find an article like this pointing that out, right? Other people have been digging into this. Continuing on here, these trends in the job market are leading economists to predict that post-pandemic housing preferences may move away from the dense metropolitan areas due to the virus and more lenient work from home situations, which I think is legitimate. I think that's a valid thought. Again, I was thinking about that. And it only makes sense that if you didn't need to be closer to the office, and maybe some people live in the city more because of the quality of life than they do because of their desire to actually be in the city and loving the city. Now, back to the article here. Moving away from the central core has traditionally offered affordability at the cost of your time and gas money. Relaxing those costs by working remotely could mean more households choose those larger homes farther out, easing price pressure on urban and inner suburban areas, said Zillow senior principal economist Skylar Olson. And this is one of those things I was thinking about too, right? Why do people live in the city? If you're watching this and you live in Seattle, maybe you're renting in Seattle or you own in Seattle, why do you live in Seattle? If you're in Bellevue, why do you live in Bellevue, right? What is it that about those cities that makes you want to live there? And for me, I know personally, I've lived in Seattle and I've lived in Bellevue. I currently live in a suburb just north of Seattle. I used to live in the city and I really liked the convenience. I loved being close to where I was at. It was great to not have to drive into the city every day. It was great to have all the local restaurants and shops. It was great to have all the city parks. So I loved all of those things, right? And as my family has shifted and my life has shifted, I've enjoyed being a little bit farther north, a little bit out of the city, or south. You could be south, right? And get out of the city. But you have different benefits. I have a little bit newer house or a little bit nicer house. It's less expensive for what you get, right? I have a bigger yard. I have a beautiful yard. And I'm still close to parks and I can get to Seattle really quickly. I can get to Bellevue really quickly. But I still have some of those other things. And so for me, as I'm living in my house right now, I'm considering what I'm getting out of my house. And I'm realizing I don't have a home office. Okay, I don't have a home office. I am working in my bedroom, okay? In general, I'm working in my bedroom and I have my computer monitor set up, my keyboard, mouse, all that stuff. It's all on my dresser. And I have a folding table and I have a kitchen chair kind of pushed up against the wall in my bedroom. So if I want to sit, I can go over and sit at my sitting desk. So I'm curious in the comments below what your work from home situation looks like right now. It'd be kind of a fun thing to see what everybody else is going through right now. But for me, working from home isn't ideal. I've got 3 kids. My wife's been watching another one. So 4 kids running around in the house being loud, and I'm in my bedroom with the door shut trying to get work done. But it's not as easy as coming into the office. So for us, thinking about like, okay, what if I had my own space to work? That would be great, right? Especially if this was a more normal thing. So I could only imagine other people are thinking the same thing. And interestingly enough, the article thinks that too. Back to the article here. As people consider housing options in conjunction with remote work, the amount of space desired by home shoppers will also shift. Zillow predicts that larger homes, especially those with extra rooms or home offices, will be in high demand, which is just what I mentioned here. So Redfin CEO Glenn Kellerman also had a few thoughts here about the maybe move from the city out to the suburbs. And his thought here was prior to the pandemic, the housing affordability crisis was already driving people from large cities to small, now more permissive policies around remote work and rising wariness about close quarters will likely accelerate that trend. So he's thinking here as well that people that work in San Francisco or Seattle might commute from places like Sacramento or Tacoma, so suburbs that are a little bit farther away actually, but if you're only coming into the office a couple times a week, it doesn't really matter as much. And his thought here is that the whole narrative, back to the article, of the past 200 years of people moving away from the smaller towns into the big cities might start shifting here again if it's convenient to live in the smaller towns and the smaller cities and remote into work. And I'm curious to see, I've thought about like Eastern Washington. It's the weather over in Eastern Washington is so much nicer in general as far as like the climate. You've got the clear days, a lot more sunshine, but there aren't as many jobs over there. So if you could somehow keep your job here in Western Washington and live in Eastern Washington, I think that would be a really big perk. And some people I know have already done that in their jobs because they can work remotely, but it'll be really interesting to see if some of these companies are a lot more flexible with their work from home abilities, if you see people maybe moving over to the other side of the mountains even. All right, we're about to wrap up here. Last little quote here that I wanted to go over here. According to the Pew Research Center, only 7% of American workers had the option to telecommute as a benefit prior to COVID-19, although over 40% of jobs could be performed remotely. With more employers seeing that remote work is a possibility, this gap may narrow once the pandemic is over, and I think that's super true. I know for me, with my assistant, I've gotten to continue working with her, and she's been remote and in the office before, and now she's completely remote. And it's been interesting to just interact because we're still able to meet virtually. We still meet on Microsoft Teams every day, still do our team meeting, and she's still super productive. So working from home doesn't necessarily mean we're not productive. And I think that was always maybe a misconception or a concern that employers had with giving that benefit, is that, hey, if we send our workers home, they're going to goof around and they're not going to be productive. And I know for me personally, I can be flexible where I work. I can work at the office, I can work at my house, I can work at a coffee shop, and I know that I can be productive any of those places. So for me, it's a little easier to extend that same trust to an employee. And I get there's probably some employees that aren't as responsible with their time, but I've found with my own employee that she's super responsible and super on it, even though she's working from home. So I think other people are seeing that as well. I've had some of my clients who have been able to work from home that are hearing that from their companies as well, that they're actually talking internally about how can we shift permanently to where they can work from home 2, 3, 4 days a week and only come into the office occasionally. So it'll be really interesting to see. I don't think this article thinks either, as it wraps it up, that the overall home prices in the city are going to plummet and that everybody's going to want to move out of the city, because I think there are lots of reasons that people live in the city that are outside of the convenience of location and not having to drive into the office. But I do expect that maybe some of the people that were trying to buy in the city and some of this competition might push up into the north suburbs, east suburbs, and the south suburbs. And it'd be interesting to see. Makes me really glad to own in the suburbs, right? Because if there's a flood of people wanting to buy, there are still fewer homes up there, bigger lots, and it'll be interesting to see what happens to prices. So in conclusion, I think this article really is pointing out some trends that are significant and profound. It remains to be seen whether companies really do allow more remote work, because that's really what this all hinges on. It's fun to think about and dream about, but really right now we're in some crazy and unprecedented times and people are adapting, and it'll be interesting to see how much of this carries over into a post-COVID-19 world. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you found some value in the content, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel, and heck, please ring the bell as well. It helps with the algorithm and also helps you see more of the videos. On this channel, you're gonna find lots of other videos about the Seattle real estate market and even some fun videos of people buying their first house and or selling their house as well. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.